Welcome into the Otson Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on today's show. And football's kind of started. Oregon had media day, their own media day on Monday. All three of us were there, as was John, our intern, and our photographers, Craig and Jason. We got a bunch of content up. 40 plus players spoke with the media. Dan Lanning spoke with us. We got video. We have one-on-ones. We have a bunch of stuff from Erik and Jared up already on the site from their times at the side podiums with players. So highly encourage you guys to go to duckterritory.com and make sure to take advantage of the promo right now, 60% off. It's the best way to support this podcast is by subscribing to duckterritory.com. And for less than $50, you get all of football, all of men's and women's basketball, all of Jared's baseball coverage, softball coverage, and all of recruiting all the way until July 30th of next season. Highly encourage you guys to do that. All right, let's start off first and foremost. Erik, you got the question in with Dan about some injury news because there were still some lingering guys that we just didn't know about that dealt with either injuries in the 2023 season or guys that suffered injuries during the spring game. We got the latest there.
Yeah, and it's certainly possible there's guys who we didn't ask about who we're going to get out there. And we should note we don't get access to practice until sometime next week. The first couple of days are going to be closed, so we won't be doing attendance and doing the whole, hey, these guys are here, these guys aren't thing. But I think notably Noah Winnington sounds like he's good to go. I spoke with him pretty extensively. We can talk about that in a moment. Dave Iuli is also good to go. He had broken a bone in his foot back in spring, which is always kind of scary, especially for a big boy. And then Jaleel Florence, I think, is the one that I'd love to get more information from Dan on. We're not going to, but he's pretty close, according to Dan. But as I recall, Jared, if we looked back, was he probably
said
pretty
that
close?
In the spring?
I was going to say, I think he was also pretty close in April. So we'll see what pretty close means and if Jaleel gets out there. We should know, when Matt and I were over at SNL on Saturday, we saw Jaleel. He was moving around fine. Didn't see any medical apparatus, so that seemed positive. But that seems like the one guy that we know of right now, at least publicly, that we don't expect to be available to start practice this week.
Which is a positive. I mean, you always kind of go into a season hoping that there are no off-season injuries or what was the year where Patrick Herbert tore something in his leg during SNL. You always prepare for the worst and pray for the best in those situations. And it seems like Oregon has been knock on wood here, pretty good so far with the early season injuries. But Florence, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he got injured in November, so he's had a lot of time, but I don't know what the injury was, and it was a lower body or lower leg injury. But we don't know how long or what the process was to recover. So we'll see, but it's a good thing that they don't immediately need him off the bat and could give him a couple more weeks rest if need be.
Yeah, they're loaded at the cornerback position. They've got a bunch of experienced guys. They've got some talented freshmen or younger players. And we should also note, Dalen Austin is eligible to play. Dalen didn't really want to talk much about it, but did say that he is eligible and will have the opportunity to get himself onto the football field as well. So that's just another guy there that could play. Another player that Dan glowingly spoke about and will have some role on this team. Jared's got a story up on the site already on it. Bryce Betcher was drafted this summer and is electing to play football one more time. Jared, what's the latest there? Why did he come back for this season when he honestly didn't have to because he's an MLB guy now?
Yeah, I've been talking about this for months, and this is kind of always what it was going to happen was if Bryce was drafted, he was going to play football, and he just loves football. I mean, the entire baseball season, I chat to him on the side, just, hey, how you doing? You missing football? Blah blah blah. And his favorite quote was, "The body craves contact." So that's the kind of guy that you're dealing with here. And I think it's great that he's back and playing football this season. This will be his last year, obviously. He will not be playing baseball in the spring, obviously. But it was cool. It was a nice story. He talked about how he was at a workout for the football team because that's what he's doing nowadays. And his agent gave him a call and he's like, "Hey, either the Astros or the Royals are going to pick you up here in this round. So you might want to get home and get to a TV or something." So he asked for permission to leave the football practice in the weight room and ask if he could go watch himself get drafted on national television. And the coach, agreed. Coach Porter, who I don't know if I know his name, but he agreed. He said, "Yeah, no, get home." So yeah, he watched. He was drafted by the Astros there in the 13th round, like pick 327, if my memory serves me correctly. But it's a very nice story, and yeah, he's going to be, Oregon's third, fourth, fifth string linebacker, depending on what happens. I don't know what the real depth looks like.
Sure.
But he's going to be a guy who, Eric, I think you and I talked about this a long time ago, where Betcher might be better suited to be a Big Ten linebacker than a Pac-12 linebacker, just because he's, more of a traditional Mac. He's a guy who, like I said, he craves contact. He wants to get down there and get downhill and try to stop a running back going through the ABC gap. He wants to lay somebody out like a pulling guard or something. And in the Pac-12, that can happen, but when you're playing USC, when you're playing Washington or Arizona or countless other teams where there's a lot of spread, a lot of man-on-man, a lot of zone coverage, that might not be his strong suit, but the Big Ten, as we've talked about many a times in this podcast, is going to be, more run heavy than not. And that could suit him well. So he said he's got to add a couple pounds, get away from being in baseball shape, go to football shape, which makes sense. And it's a good story. I think it adds a lot of depth, but it's just good to see that, Bryce made the decision, and we'll be seeing him out there on Saturdays.
I just had a thought, Matt, on that. Yeah. I'll be very curious to see what this linebacker rotation looks like. I think we obviously know who the top two guys are, and by all indication, Devin Jackson's kind of your number three. And I know it doesn't exactly work that way, but if you were to put them on a list of the guys you expected to be the most integral at the position, probably lead the team in snaps, it would be that order. Bryce was fifth in tackles last year. I'm just really curious to see where he ends up in this hierarchy. Is he their number four guy? What happens with Jerry Mixon? What happens with some of these true freshmen? I mean, I thought Kamar Mathuti physically looked the part in spring. Dylan Williams is here now. I'm really kind of curious to see Bryce's impact this year. Obviously, he was starting early last season, in part because Justin was out, not in part because Justin was out. They've got their full complement now of three guys who I think are pretty clearly ahead of him on the depth chart. Is he still somebody who plays 15, 20 snaps per game, or is he more somebody that plays quite a bit less than that and is more of a guy who comes in and, as Jared said, kind of special situations? So I find him to be really interesting, but it's really important he's back, in my opinion, because you've got those three guys, two of which have really been productive. The third, Devin, is still kind of more hypothetical at this point than anything else. And so to at least have somebody that can play at a high level on the roster to join them is, I think, really important.
If he ends up being their fifth guy, like Jared maybe teased, that's probably a good sign that the other four guys are pretty good, because he has his deficiencies, no doubt, but he was really solid for a really good defense last season. And to Jared's point, they're going into a league that's probably better suited for his style of play anyways, which could lead to him seeing more time as well.
Yeah, you could, if you go through Betcher's game log, you can see his snap count just dwindle towards the last half of the season. And that's for a couple of reasons. Just because Justin Jacobs came back and he's the better player of the two, and they played more passing friendly teams. So, and that you'd rather have guys like Jamal Hill, who was on the team at the time, and Devin Jackson play as the second, third, fourth string guys because of their ability to move around the field better. But we'll see. It's interesting no matter what.
Eric, you spoke with Dylan Gabriel, hung out with him for a while. I thought it was interesting about just his management of expectations, and because this is a guy that hasn't taken a snap at Oregon, and he's, I think, either the odds-on favorite or a top 3 odds-on favorite to win the Heisman. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I don't, he's a guy who, I would implore listeners who aren't familiar with Dylan to go just watch him be interviewed. It doesn't even have to be yesterday's interview. It could be an interview probably at any point in his college career. This guy is so calm and confident, and kind of wise beyond his years. And so like, I just don't think this type of stuff matters to him. Like, and I was thinking about this yesterday, just transcribing, I should say, his quotes of like, when you're playing at a school like Oregon and you're recruiting the best and brightest college athletes, and that's exactly what Dillon Gabriel is. Like, he's a very much like an outlier type of personality and young man, I think. It's in terms of how he carries himself and how sure and confident he is of himself. And so like, I think the expectation thing, like, he probably embraces that more than, I don't think he's somebody who's like, this is maybe an unfair comparison, but like, I don't know if I always felt that way about like Tyler Shuck when he was here a couple of years ago, or Anthony Brown necessarily, of like, these were guys that had some deficiencies on the field, but they maybe weren't quite confident. And maybe this is unfair, but maybe they weren't quite as confident of who they were and their ability to kind of handle the expectations and stand up to the limelight and everything. I think Dillon has that factor. Like, he's got some it factor, in my opinion. And I think that part really kind of stood out talking with him on Monday, talking with him last Thursday. I had a quick one-on-one with him out in Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days. He's just somebody who is very confident in who he is and has, I mean, we spent probably half the time, I didn't include it in the transcript, talking about his dog Winnie, who had just passed away earlier this week. And like, he was very vulnerable and kind of the emotional impact that it had. I mean, it's just a really fascinating guy and somebody who I think, as this season carries on, and of course, some of it's going to be dependent on how the team plays, but I have to think Oregon fans are just going to love this guy. Like, I think he's very endearing, and he's, like I've said several times here, like, you can just tell he knows who he is and he's confident with who he is. And so I don't think any of this external stuff will be stuff that impacts him really much at all.
I think he very similar to Bo Nix, like the way he carries himself, the way he handles pressure, comments about himself, like very, very similar. And it's probably a common trait at the position. Like, these guys are so well trained
and mature because they're both like, they've been doing this forever. I don't know. Like Dillon Gabriel, just talking to him and then talking to like Dante Moore, who I think is going to be awesome. There's just a different level of maturity between those two guys.
This spring, Derek Harmon, Oregon needed defensive lineman. Derek Harmon from Michigan State ended up hitting the portal, was long flirted, landed at Oregon. Jared, you got time with him, and it was his first public appearance as a member of the 2024 roster. So naturally, there was a lot of attention to why Oregon. What was the fit here for him?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of attention. I was excited to speak with Derek for the first time. Kind of a so-so answer. He just said that this decision was about him, like what was best for him, which I think is a good, like, that's probably what most transfer portal guys are doing.
Yep.
Players with potential to go to the NFL on the next level and thrive there as well. And he really highlighted that, it was his decision. He wanted to do what's best for him. But what Oregon had at on their defensive side of the ball, their coaching staff, was different than a lot of other places. And he specifically highlighted that, Dan Lanning was a defensive-minded head coach. He was a defensive coordinator at Georgia. He worked with NFL players like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, the other guy who plays for Philadelphia, Jordan Davis. That's the other guy who plays. Couldn't remember his name. Like, real bona fide, absolute first-round studs on the defensive line. And then you have Tosh Lupoy, who is a defensive coordinator at Alabama for 2 years. He coached in the NFL as a defensive line coach for a couple of years before coming to Oregon. And then Tony Tuioti, who himself is a really good defensive line coach and really is good with teaching technique and getting guys better, just overall player development. And he just laid out that guideline of like, when he was looking for schools, not a lot of teams compared to what Oregon had to provide him the best for him to presumably get to the next level. And if you're Oregon, and if it's a rental, that's fine. They needed a lot of help on the interior defensive line. And with Harmon and with Jamari Caldwell, who I also spoke to, those are two of the top 10 defensive linemen in the transfer portal. Those are two guys who are going to presumably line up at the same time. One at like the 3 technique, one at the 2 technique, and just give quarterbacks and offensive lines hell. And I asked him if he could like explain how he is as a player, because if anybody's watched his tape, you know that he's really dominant on the interior, and he's also like 6'5", 330 pounds, which is really large for a guy who's going to line up at the 2 or the 3 eye. He just said that he's a dog. He's a selfish individual. He wants like all the stats, and he's going to try to get it all. So I think it's obviously, I always thought it was a really good addition. I was huge on Oregon needing to add interior defensive line help. But it was good to talk to him, and he's going to be wearing number 55, unlike the number 4 that he's wearing in EA Sports College Football 25. That was a mix-up for some reason. So Derek Harmon was it was good to chat to him, but I'm just looking forward to seeing what it looks like on the field, because that guy's a monster.
I'm going to pivot. You brought it up, the game. I did the podcast with 11 guys, so I didn't get to roam as much as you did, but did it come up at all? Because I asked a couple guys, or most of the guys, and surprisingly, like, they were all like, I don't play it. I maybe only touched it for once. Patrick Herbert's the only one who said that he's played it a bunch, and that everyone else that says that they don't is lying.
Oh no, it came up a bunch.
Yeah. Trayshawn Holden, self-proclaimed best player on the team and playing in the new game.
Yeah, Trayshawn's name came up as one of the better players. Same with Tysheem Johnson.
Yep.
Justin Jacobs said he was the best player on the team, but that's like the second or third answer I've gotten from Justin where he's like, I'm the best at doing something, whatever that's about. But it came up a lot, and some people were not thrilled with their ratings. Devin Jackson wasn't thrilled with his speed rating, and he's a 94 speed. It's like, what?
I mean,
you're a linebacker. You're like one of the fastest linebackers in the game. But it was funny. A lot of guys talked some stuff, but apparently, the only thing that was the funniest thing of all the EA stuff was apparently Tez Johnson not good at the game.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So Tez, if you're hearing this, that's what other people are saying, not me.
And one thing that was funny that Kenyon Sadiq brought. Oh no, actually, Terrence Ferguson asked Kenyon Sadiq this question because he had just finished his interview. Apologies, I think there's someone starting a lawnmower right next door, which is great timing for this. Yeah, super fun. But Ferguson asked Kenyon if he was the fastest tight end on the team, and Kenyon said yes. And apparently, Ferg is faster in the
video game than Kenyon.
Yes, and Kenyon, who was very careful not to say, like, he was like one of these young guys, hasn't done a lot of interviews, like wanted to stay in line. I was like, his one gripe the whole time was like, I'm faster than Terrence. I should be the fastest tight end in the game.
Mateo Uyunglele apparently turns into like this beast of a tight end if you move him there, and I told him that, and he instantly was like joking how he needs to talk to Dan Lanning about getting some touches on football because in real life, because if it's true in the video game, it's a real possibility in real life, apparently. Lamar Winston had a funny comment to me about how he drives Jordan Birch crazy because he said whenever he plays, he instantly benches Birch and then puts himself in his spot and is like, no fear at all of doing that.
Well, it's funny because even Dan pointed out that Dan had some funny comments about the game, about how he bought it for his kids and all that stuff. But he also was somehow aware that Jeff Bossa was playing edge in the game and not inside linebacker. So he petitioned a light petition to get that corrected and get the guys played in the right spots.
And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I saw like the screen grab of it, and Lanning's face in the video game is atrocious. It's not even close to what he is. And Lanning just asked, and he'll be in the game next year, he said.
Yeah, it's weird how they can't even make him like resemble them in the slightest.
I had one question. Do you think we'll get to a point in the future where we're in the game?
As reporters?
Us?
They have a reporting scrum, and they get that detailed where they're like, here's James Crepea for the Oregonian, and here are the 24/7 guys.
No.
Maybe I wouldn't be surprised.
Of course not. No.
I wouldn't be surprised though if they like somehow do some branding with like 24/7 from a recruiting standpoint.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they'll do that sort of thing. I was joking, but I don't. They're just, it gets so in depth now that they're going to like have.
Well, Eric, there are reporters in the video game.
Right. I know.
They're on the field, and when you score a touchdown, they instantly start looking at their phones.
If you want to use
true.
my name, image, and likeness there, you can put me there. I'll be standing there. I don't mind.
Matthew Bedford, to me, raved about Poncho, the ability to step in right away and look like he's played the position forever. Eric, you spoke with Poncho about just the last 6-7 months of development, taking in the role of replacing Jackson Powers Johnson. Just what did he have to say?
Yeah, I think the summer was about two things for him: consistency snapping, and then confidence making his pre-snap reads and calls. I think those are. And this is a guy we talked about it a lot, so I won't rehash it too much. But this is a guy who hasn't played center at all, like he wasn't a high school center even. So he played his first in-game snaps were this past year, filling in briefly up in Seattle for Jackson Powers Johnson, and then obviously starting the Fiesta Bowl. These were the things he was focused on, and he felt like he'd made strides there. I think Dan did a good job of conveying kind of like how he'd kind of maybe grown confident in himself to like carry himself in a certain way that was needed to play that position. You have to remember this is a teenager still who's a true sophomore. You kind of pointed out Bedford had some nice things to say, but Johnny Cornelius said something like he's the most impressive or one of the most impressive players I've seen playing college football. I think just in terms of like the character and how he carries himself. So let's be honest, this is one of the question marks on offense. There aren't a lot. Oregon is loaded at on offense. They've got a Heisman favorite at quarterback. They've got a loaded running back room. They have maybe the best receiver room in the country. Tight end, they're great. They've got two of the better tackles in the country. Center is like one of those spots where you go, it's kind of interesting. And so I was one of the things I wanted to ask people about. And I think the older guys are certainly, because even remember Marcus Harper last year was kind of hyping him up during a scrum back in fall. This is a guy that I think all the veterans know it's really important that he feels good about himself and that he's confident in himself, because that's such an important part of playing this spot. And I really got a sense that there had been kind of a shift there and that he was buying in on himself. I talked a little bit about how I thought Dylan Gabriel had already reached that level and has probably been self-confident for 4 or 5 years. Like Poncho, I think you can kind of just see a little bit more self-assuredness, and that's super important for this position. The snaps to me are the one thing that we're going to have to see on the field, but this is a young guy that I think everybody's really high on, and that he also said he'd reworked his body a little bit. He's now about 325, 330, similar to last year's weight, but he toned up a little bit and added some muscle.
Jared, I'll give you the floor here to maybe brain dump one or two things that haven't gone up on the site yet that you thought were interesting for Media Day.
You want real stuff or like kind of fun, fake, pretend story stuff? Kickball, big topic of discussion.
Kickball.
With
the game that 2-year second graders play?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and college athletes and adults, and soon enough, I'm sure it'll be an Olympic game. Yeah, no, a lot of discussion in the kickball side of the world. So for those listening who don't care, just skip ahead probably another 2 minutes or something like that.
You're going 2 minutes on this, Jared?
I've got a couple people to talk about. Ross James began the story because Tyson asked a great question. He's like, does kicking things hard like help you in everyday life at all? And the original answer was no. But then there was the kickball game that like Oregon players had done. It was like a whole team activity. And Ross said he wasn't that good, which was alarming considering he's the punter. But he said that he was okay and that Matthew Bedford was pretty good. So Matthew Bedford comes up to the table, was like, oh, hey, Matthew, heard that you were pretty good at playing kickball. He was like, I was all right. Hit a couple home runs, stuff like that. And then the best kickballer of them all, allegedly, was Atticus Sappington, the Oregon State transfer and fun fact, the kicker of the football team. And he nonchalantly just says, I hit a walk-off grand slam to end the game. It's like, what? Okay. He's like, yeah, I just told the guys, just get some people on base and I'll bring you all home. And he did. So that was a fun little story from Media Day. I mean, That's why I love media day the most, is because you can go and just like talk about some nothingness for a while, because there's not a whole lot of question marks going into the season.
Yep.
Because you haven't seen anything. There's no practices even. You're just kind of like, hey, how was the off season? It's like, hey, Jeff Bossa, how was hanging out with Drake and stuff like that. So it was fun. All the EA stuff we kind of already went over, but
Yep.
I'm trying to think if I have like any other actual nuggets. Jamar Caldwell is still a beast. Trying to get down in his weight, trying to get to 315, I think he said.
Ooh.
So I think that'll be good.
He's looking for soul food options in Eugene. So if you know a soul food option in Eugene, you need to shoot him a message, because he told me he loves
Soul
everything
food.
about being here, except for, he's like, no offense, y'all need some new food.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a lot of the same stuff here. Soul food, I don't know. I know Black Wolf Supper Club is like
It's good.
Cajun Louisiana stuff.
It's good. You're going to be, it's going to be lacking a little bit. I think it's good for what it is, but you're not going to check all the boxes.
It's good food,
But
but like
all the boxes there. Yeah.
Yeah, for him, like a Southern native, it's not gonna hit the same. It's good, but sorry, Jamari, there's no soul food here.
Evan Stewart was asked where the best barbecue in town was, and he said Dan Lanning's house. So that sort of speaks to the
Yeah, that makes
the lack of
sense.
options in Eugene, which I agree with. I know Matt does. Matt's a big barbecue guy, and there's just not a lot of places to go. And then also, like, maybe we got to find a way to get over to Dan's if he's barbecuing at that high of a level.
I don't.
100%.
I don't think Dan will invite us over.
You don't think Dan's going to have a media barbecue?
The gate will be closed into his long driveway.
I don't think we'll get up the driveway. Yeah, we'll be sitting down there.
I learned that, everyone knows I'm big into golf. The special team guys, Camden Lewis was the head golf guy. That has trickled down, and they have now created a specialist tournament that Lorig and Tink, they draft teams and then they play against each other. I think it's like 1 or 2 day event in the summer. And Ross James was quite proud that his unit kind of dominated with Lorig in this specialist tournament this past summer.
Well, this is actually a good transition for me. No, Winnington did spend the summer golfing quite a bit, but because of his knee injury, and it was a torn ACL, he confirmed, which is the little note I wanted to make sure I got in. He said his golf game is really struggled. He said that's actually been that part is worse than his football game in terms of the recovery. I don't know how good he was to begin with, but that's
not good.
Yeah,
he was bemoaning the fact that he wasn't up to par, probably even close to par with the after the knee injury. Did you have anything else there, Matt? I had like a couple injury things and another thought, but what'd you have?
I think the biggest nugget I got was probably Bedford and Cardwell both talking about just the coaching that they have at their position groups. Bedford said he specifically landed at Oregon because of the reputation that Malik Terry and then the law firm, the guys underneath him, have. And I thought that was like, the three of us, I don't think have ever really doubted Malik Terry's stature in the coaching ranks.
No.
But he is a younger coach, and it is something that I'm sure other schools probably negative recruit. And a high profile transfer literally said, like, the big reason why I came here was because of the coaching and the development of this unit, and the opportunity to play at a high level. And then Cardwell said the same thing of just like Tony Tuiotti's reputation, the opportunity to play right away, and seeing what guys did last season and the year before that, and Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy's defense was highly, highly attractive to him and his decision to come here.
Yeah, I think Oregon's coaching staff is pretty well received nationally at this point. I don't think there's that many uphill battles. I think Dan's back-to-back head coach has done a great job. Mario did a great job building out his staff, but you always like to hear kind of what the reputation is, because believe it or not, we're going to probably assume, unless there's something really glaring, that most of these coaches are pretty good at their jobs. And just to hear it from somebody who's in the rooms, it's helpful. It's helpful. I've said this is a stupid tangent. I would actually love there to be a database that like graded coaches in terms of their different attributes, and like, this guy's a really good skill development guy. This guy's a good, communicator. This guy's good at recruiting, because it's hard in our industry to be like, hey, they just brought over Rashad Samples, and aside from reading his like biography and looking into like some of the recruiting he's done, it's hard to like come away with like a bunch of takeaways. But anyway, that's a business idea for someone smarter than I to take a look at. Trying to think if I had any. I wanted to say one thing on Noah Winnington, because I mentioned earlier torn ACL. He did say he was appreciative, which is his words, that he did suffer the injury, because this is his first time not playing football for like basically his whole life, he said, and it being away from it kind of, I think, maybe kind of heightened his appreciation and love for the game. And he said it's been a really tough year. The doctors gave him a 12-month recovery, and he was like, I'm going to do it in 6. And that's what he did. I mean, he was out there for every spring practice. He said there were days he probably wasn't supposed to be out there, but he went anyway because he wanted to prove a point. They wanted him to wear his knee brace. Jared, I don't remember how many days he was wearing a knee brace, but that was something he said she kind of shed earlier than expected, or was kind of requested even. And so this is somebody who really wanted to get out here and get going. And so I'll be curious. I'll be really fascinated to see how he looks. Sometimes you see running backs tear tendons in their, whether it's an Achilles or a knee, and have a really hard time coming back. I'm hopeful and optimistic that he'll look like he did a couple of years ago, but he's clearly put everything into making his return, and it's good to have him back with Jordan and with Jay Harris and Jaden Lamar and Dink Riggs.
Is that his nickname?
Dink.
Yeah. Dink.
It's
the
Dink.
wandering.
And I asked Noah where that came from. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I call him Freaky Dink. And I said, okay. So, yeah,
that's a nickname decision. I'll tell you what. That's a word. That's a word.
You should ask Dan about Freaky Dink.
I don't know if that's going to come up. I'm going to wait the necessary 2 years before he's made available, and then we can talk to him about why his nickname is Dink, assuming he's even here at that point. But there you go. That's the last one I had. That was the one note I wanted to make, because we have a guy on the team named Dink.
That's good.
Oh boy,
that's good. Is it good that Noah Winnington cut the recovery time in half? Anybody else I don't really know about that. It's like, hey, I didn't follow any of the procedures my surgeon told me to do, but I'm here. Like,
he said he had a high pain tolerance, Jared. He has a high pain tolerance.
So do I, but I mean, cutting 6 months off of a recovery doesn't sound.
Well, I think
this is just me being the pessimist in the room, but I'm also okay.
It's a very reasonable question. I had the same thought, because it felt fast. Because in retrospect, we heard he had torn some ligaments. We didn't have it like confirmed what it was when he was out, obviously. And the fact that he had torn ACL and he was practicing, I think he was at all 15 practices. In retrospect, that's a little bit weird. You know what I mean?
Because he tore it in September and was back in, what is it, April, March?
Mid-March, they had a practice, and I think he was out there. And he tore it the last week of September. So like, it was quick. So I had the same thought.
Like 6 months.
We'll see. And that's why I asked him of like, do you really feel full strength? Because it's quick and everything. And he said, yeah, I feel like I'm ready to compete. So I don't know. I think that's a fair question to ask, though, when you hear a guy did 6 months less of recovery than what the doctors expected or recommended. I think that's a fair suggestion.
Doctors might know something or not. I don't know.
Maybe it was only a partial tear. We don't know.
I know. I only know the words that Noah said yesterday, and he said they tore his ACL, and he was told 12 months, and then he did 6. So
pretty damn impressive.
There's that angle too. That's one or the other. It's impressive, or is he making, or is a little bit rash? I don't know. We'll see. I think the proof will be in the pudding this fall 100%. For sure.
Anything else?
I don't think I have anything.
I don't think I have anything. We've got some content we'll get up on the site later, but I can't really think of anything that like leaps off the page to me.
Fall camp starts Wednesday, July 31st, and we'll speak with Dan Lanning 7 different times between Wednesday evening to Wednesday, August 21st in the afternoon, before they take their 5-day kind of hiatus from the media. So we'll have interviews basically every single day starting Wednesday all the way to the 21st, except for Sundays, which there will be 4 of them. We'll get into practice a handful of times as well, being able to see guys, but that one won't happen until the first one doesn't come until August 6th when we get to go in to watch practice. But we're going to speak with all the coaches, Lanning, like I said, 7 different times. We'll speak with various student athletes leading up to Oregon kicking off its first season in the Big Ten. So highly encourage you guys to stick on duckterritory.com all month, all season long as we cover this first big season for Oregon football in the Big Ten. Until the next one, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.